Dr. I'm the programming chair of AMMSA, the American Muslim Medical Student Association. As you can tell, I'm not the technical chair of this organization for good reason, but on behalf of the board and we humbly welcome you all to this amazing session. Um, Balancing Deen as a medical professional with Shaykh Dr. Husain Sattar. If you like this session, the amazing thing is he is also coming to our annual conference in Dallas, Texas from October 31st to November 2nd. His session will be Sunday, November 2nd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., a special 2-hour session. If you come to conference, you will have a variety of programming. We have multiple plenaries. We have an amazing and robust networking session with over 15 specialties represented with the option of one-on-one mentorship, as well as our Saturday night banquet, which is always a fan favorite. We also have multiple workshops, and all meals are included in the price. Tickets right now are $125, and ticket prices will go up on October 1st. So I encourage you all to get tickets sooner rather than later. Events like this Zoom that we do, it's a hallmark of why AMMSA exists. Our mission is simple. Have been an organization for about 4 years, and our goal is to empower Muslim medical students all across the country to help them develop professionally and grow spiritually. If you want to tune into more events like this, we previously had events such as Islam and palliative care. We had an event with Dr. Fatima Daoud regarding OB-GYN and looking through it through different fiqh lenses. We also have networking sessions. We recently had a dermatology and ENT panel, and we have a neurosurgery and urology panel in the works. So please stay tuned for that. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to now introduce our wonderful and amazing speaker, Sheikh Dr. Husain Sattar. He is an Islamic scholar. He is a pathologist at the University of Chicago, and he also is the founder of Pathoma. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh no, subhanAllah, my pleasure and honor to be with all of you this evening.
Yeah. Let's dive right in. Um, But to set the stage, let's start at the very beginning. You were born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago. You attended the University of Chicago for both college and medical school. So why medicine?
Good question. To be honest, I did not. It wasn't in my original plan to go to medical school. Um, my kind of journey into science goes all the way back to, I would say, roughly around the like early 1980s, and in this kind of odd turn of events. I was at that point, I was probably about 10 years old. And every evening, my father used to put on this TV show on PBS, which was called, I guess, The Week in Wall Street or something like that. Maybe it was once a week. And each episode would be like these half-hour episodes where they would talk about different companies. And I vividly remember that he would be watching this, and I would kind of sit there, and they would be talking about this new company that was going to do all these amazing things and change the world, and it was called Genentech. Um, so my initial kind of interest in bio started through biotechnology. I just was really curious about this company and what they were doing and why there was so much excitement about it. And so that kind of piqued my interest in science. And so from there, I got really involved in science. And I would say, let's say seventh, eighth grade, roughly, we had this local, like most high school, like most junior highs have, we had this like local science fair. And I remember I did this project, which was the effects of ethanol on a spider's web. And I took a whole bunch of spiders from my basement, like collected them, and exposed them to different amounts of alcohol and had them like spin these webs. And eventually this project like it went to the state, and I was literally, I think at that point, eighth, seventh, eighth grade. It ended up in the state science fair. And then from there, in high school, when I was a sophomore, there was this opportunity to do a 2-month recombinant DNA research program at the University of the Pacific. So we're talking about, this was 1988, roughly. Yeah, 1988. Um, Maybe 87, 88. So I actually flew down to California from Chicago, um, stayed at the University of the Pacific for 2 months. It was this course based on recombinant DNA. We learned at that point how to sequence, how to do restriction digests, how to clone. We actually did some cloning in that class, in that summer camp as well. And then when I returned back home, I was really, really motivated to try to apply those skills. So I ended up getting a job at Northwestern, which is close to where I grew up, and I was researching in the lab. So I would literally, uh, during the day, I'd be in high school, and most people sneak out of high school to get out of high school. I would sneak out of high school to go to the lab. So I would be like sneaking out and like going to Northwestern and doing research. I was literally doing bench work at the time. And so I did this bench work, and my mentor, who I was working under, his name was Richard Morimoto. He's a world famous scientist even today. And he had gone to the University of Chicago, and he just encouraged me to go to U of C. And so I ended up going to University of Chicago for undergrad. And then from there, got involved in research labs. And because there were lots of MSTP students in research labs, I started engaging with medical students. And slowly but surely, they converted me over to considering doing an MD. So I would say I started my career thinking I was going to do a PhD, thinking I was going to do research, and the goal was to go into biotechnology. But then the shift occurred, and I ended up in medicine. And that's kind of what drove me to medicine. It wasn't like I woke up when I was little and said I'm going to be a doctor. It didn't come from there. It actually came through my research that eventually led me to medicine.
Is that also what led you to pathology in specific?
No, that's a longer story. But I think I will say that the research background is just a huge part of me. I'm still like a research person at heart. And I think that's what resonated in pathology. So the story then continues. I was doing research, eventually ended up at University of Chicago Medical School. I graduated early, eventually ended up at the medical school at U Chicago. And then from there, the first 2 years of medicine, honestly, were very, very difficult. I had a tough time. I'm sure you can all relate because it's difficult to begin with, but it just was not me. I was so used to controlling the flow of how much information I took in, and being able to have the time to really reflect on each and everything I was learning. And medical school was just so fast, no time to digest. Before you could figure out A, they would move you on to D. You'd like skip B and C and go straight to D. And so first 2 years of med school was really tough for me. I just couldn't really, honestly, I couldn't get my footing. And by the end of third year, I really had just like burnt out, in the sense that I just like needed a break. And plus, I was getting involved in Islamic activities at that time and wanted to increase my Islamic knowledge. So I took off. I essentially was thinking I was going to go into internal medicine and then hem-onc.
Okay.
Um, at the end of my third year, I did all my sub-Is. I had my letters. It was all set. And then I kind of took a deep breath and said, you know what? I'm taking time off. I just like pulled a parachute and just left med school for 3 years. Now, I didn't
Hmm.
technically leave. They gave me a leave of absence, but I say did it officially, but took off 3 years. I was in Damascus for some time, and then spent a lot of time in Pakistan as well studying. And when I was there in Pakistan in particular, I was really just embedded amongst the people. And I just began to see some of the difficulties of the local populations that I was living with. And I kind of made a about face and said, you know what? I actually want to do pediatrics and do international medicine through pediatrics. So eventually I come back to med school at U Chicago. I honestly only had about 6 months left. And I did two sub-Is, or actually three. I did three sub-Is in two or three sub-Is in pediatrics, and had my letters, actually got offered a position and basically was done. I was done. I was okay. I'm going to pediatrics. Everything's all set. And then I got this email from one of the national pathology organizations offering any medical student who would do a pathology rotations $1,000 stipend. And honestly, I did it for the stipend. I didn't do it because I was too interested in pathology. But anyway, I ended up doing this rotation and I just was immediately attracted to it.
Mhm.
And I sat there in the first week, and I could see it was like very much up my alley. It was very scientific. There was a lot of time to think through things. The pager wasn't going off constantly. I
Yeah.
wasn't running around all over the place trying to like, discharge patients and make sure orders were complete. And it just really resonated with me. But I was super hesitant because I was already kind of this rebel. I had taken off 3 years when no one else, who takes off 3 years in the middle of medical school to just go off and do something that's not medicine related. And then on top of that, who switches from like internal medicine to like pediatrics and then like all of a sudden now I'm gonna like switch to pathology. So it took me the whole month to finally say, you know what, this is where my heart is. I'm going to just do it. I literally, it's very funny. One day, if you ever happen to see my office at U Chicago, the office where I sit currently was the same office where the program chair used to sit. So I knocked on the same door that I enter every day to now
It's
where I've entered,
amazing.
for the last 20 years, I've been entering this same office. But I knocked on that door and I took my pediatrics application, and it literally talked about how pediatrics was the next best thing since sliced bread. And I just said, hey, I want to do a pathology rotation, or sorry, a pathology residency. And she just, the director just kind of like put her glasses down, looked up from her microscope at me like this and said, what are you talking about? And I just explained, like, I've got this research background and I took time off and I did this rotation and it just really, really seemed fascinating to me. And so fortunately, they gave me a chance and they said, okay, if you interview, I didn't apply anywhere else. It was very late in the cycle because I was massively off cycle to begin with. So I literally just accepted the position. I interviewed. They were kind enough to take me. I accepted the position and I became a pathologist. And honestly, it was probably the best decision I ever made because it really matches well with who I am. And not only who I am, but all the other things that I aspire to do. So it just fits well with me.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, you did become a pathologist because thousands of medical students
Yeah,
use Pathoma to pass our boards.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, no, thank you so much for making Pathoma. Did you see a big shift when you went from like internal medicine, hemonc, peds to then pathology, considering pathology isn't a very patient-facing specialty?
Yeah, no, I think I hinted at this where, the pager wasn't going off, right?
Okay.
Oh my gosh, on peds, how much that pager used to go off because you wouldn't
Hmm.
just get, you'd get every page anytime anything would go wrong. But the pager wouldn't go off. I would have time to think, and I, I had time to do so many other things because, like I mentioned, I had been abroad. I had been studying Islam prior to that, but I had spent my 3 years, roughly 3 years abroad, gaining a lot of knowledge, building myself up, really rethinking about who I wanted to be and where I wanted to put my time and energy. And so, just all these pieces kind of fit together. Plus that researcher in me, I mean, there's pathology is a little bit like that,
Hmm.
where you're looking at a slide and trying to solve a puzzle. All of medicine honestly is. And, when you see a patient or you hear signs and symptoms or you look at labs and you're always trying to put together a puzzle. But I think it just wasn't so important for me to have that patient interaction.
Okay.
I didn't mind being behind the scenes and I didn't mind going back to the first 2 years of med school. A lot of times people want to just like, forget that first 2 years because it's all basic science. But for me, it was a rekindling of what I was always interested in to begin with. This opportunity to really get back down to the scientific principles and apply them to all of the slides that I look at. Um, and I think if you've interacted with me in Pathoma, then in a way you kind of have a really good idea of how my mind functions. I'm like big picture. How do you paint broad strokes and put all those together to come up with a story that makes sense in your mind? in a way, science is that way as well. You're learning all these details, but you're trying to come up with a big hypothesis that fits all the data. So it just really resonated with me. It just all the pieces came together.
That's awesome. I was reading an article that the University of Chicago wrote about you, and in it they mentioned that it was during your studies in Pakistan that one of your teachers made such an amazing impression on you, and in a way planted the seeds of the resource we now know as Pathoma. Could you tell us more about his like mannerisms and how he impacted you, and kind of how Pathoma kind of got off the ground?
Yeah. So I think just you need a little background, just understand the entire story, which is that the way the Islamic studies curriculum in Pakistan and in the subcontinent in particular, more generally, the way it works is that you do this. Technically it's like this 8-year program, and you do 7 years, which is the first 7 years are a lot of background and knowledge and a lot of like building up your skills. And that culminates in this final eighth year, which is like a hadith year, where you'll cover like all the major books of hadith, and you'll discuss them, you'll go through them, you'll get exposed to them. So it's a really, really impactful year. And what happened with me is that when I went to study abroad, I was off cycle in the sense that I was only there for a couple years. And because I was only there for a couple years, they put me in like a whole bunch of mixed books the first year, across different years. And then in my final year, they put me in this like part, as in that final year that I just mentioned. And so it so happened that when I joined the institution, this teacher of mine was teaching me about like the first year, I think 3 or 4 classes. And then when I graduated to the final year, he also happened to graduate to the final year. So for the entire 2 years that I was there, I was interacting with this teacher. And one of the most unique things about this teacher is that he would lecture off the top of his mind, would never have any notes, would be very principle based. He would go through like all the principles and then eventually generate a conclusion. And he would talk to you as if there's like a thousand people in the room. There'd be just so much energy coming from him. But literally, because it was like the first year that he had been teaching, this eighth year of the curriculum. Normally, in some institutions there are thousands of students, but in this institution where I was at, there were only 10 of us, roughly. It was like a handful. But literally, like his voice would be booming off the walls because he was so energetic, so excited, so honored to be like in this position of teaching these books that he was teaching. And I think a lot of those characteristics just really resonated with me and rubbed off on me. So, number one, this idea that like if I don't know it well enough, I shouldn't be teaching it. So he would without sorry, if I don't know it well enough to do it without notes, I shouldn't be teaching it. So he would be talking off the top of his head, and I kind of saw how impactful that would be as I engaged with him because I wasn't used to that. I mean, you know better than I that like every medical school lecture is like PowerPoint, and
Yeah,
if you took away the PowerPoint, lots of us would struggle, right?
yeah.
If you just said, "Hey, this is a chalk talk," you're not going to get to use your slides. You just have to talk off the top, off the top of your head and write on the board. I think many, many, many professors would struggle, but subhanAllah, he was able to do it because there was no technology. Not only was there no technology, but the lights would be cut off every few hours because it'd be like load sharing on the generators, you know. So it was just fascinating to be with him, and maybe I didn't appreciate the effect it was having on me at that time, but slowly but surely, all these like these like methods of teaching slowly became ingrained in me, and it's so interesting, honestly, because like I was coming from literally like a brand new medical school building for the first 2 years, let's say 2 years of medicine. And then I went to this like building where the electricity doesn't even function all the time. But I had this like amazing teacher, and I feel like I gained obviously at every location, but I feel like what I gained in that unique circumstance really, really molded me in a very special way. So it ended up happening that when I came back and had to, because I joined pathology late, like I mentioned, late in the sense that I was off cycle, And because I had been abroad for 3 years, I had forgotten everything. Like literally, I came back into third and to fourth year and I didn't remember anything. I couldn't even remember how to do a standard physical exam.
Oh,
So because of that, I had to relearn everything. So what's interesting is I took pathology as a second year med student, and to be honest, I hated it. Why? Because it was like drinking water from a fire hydrant.
yep.
All right. And then
Yeah.
when I went abroad and came back, the only way I could regain my knowledge was to be like the TA of the class. So I've signed up, I volunteered myself, and obviously there was a selection process, but they were kind enough to take me. So I became the TA of the second year pathology class. And honestly, I was sitting there and I felt like I was drinking from a fire hydrant all over again, even though I had done it once. And then when I became a resident, um, I volunteered to do that during my elective periods. So I would literally go back to that second year med school class and I would be again taking that class. And this time, fine, I wasn't like drinking from a fire hydrant because I had heard the disease names and I was a bit familiar with the diseases, but it was like drinking from this, I guess, like a large hose where I still couldn't capture everything they were saying, even though I had been through this course at that point 2 times. And then while I was a resident, they eventually asked me because the director of the course retired and they were swapping directors. So they asked me if I would be willing to be like a resident, as a resident, take on like a organizational role in the class, be like a quote unquote resident director. And I mean, I was interested in teaching, so of course I took that. And even then, I felt like I was drinking from a bucket. I couldn't gather everything that they were saying. And so just going through this course over and over again really helped me to hone down my skills. And I think also taking what I gained from abroad with that teacher, I think I was able to synergize that. And that's eventually what led to the production of Pathoma. Although honestly, even after that point, there was another 10 years of teaching all over the world before I was able to like put together the materials.
Hmm. I mean, we're thankful for how it all came together. But it's absolutely true, though, that you don't really know the material until you can teach it to somebody else. That's how you know it.
Oh, well, when I was the 2 years before I did Pathoma, actually 3 years before I did Pathoma, I wanted to test my hypothesis. Now, again, I'm a scientist, so I always have to test my hypotheses, but I wanted to test my hypothesis, and I felt like I could make a contribution to pathology learning. But, is it just some idea in my head, or can I really do this? So I went to the medical school and I said, I want to start a new class for the med students. And it will be a review of all of the first 2 years of medical school from the lens of pathology. And so the dean who I was sitting with, she said to me, "Well, it sounds like a wonderful idea, but how are we going to fit this in the curriculum? The second years have absolutely no, first and second years have no time. The whole curriculum is packed." So I said, "Well, what about right before the board exam?" And they said, well, they've got like X number of weeks to study for the boards, but who's going to want to take a class right before the board exam? So I said, okay, just give me a shot. Like, let's just create this class. And if I get 5 students, no problem. So they agreed to create this class. And the funny thing is that we had like 30 spots and we ended up filling the class and like twice over. And eventually there were like 100 people sitting in this class every day. And what I would do in this class, it would meet Monday, Wednesday, no, sorry, Monday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, or something like that. We would meet 3 times a week. And I just challenged myself to be able to teach the entire thing without any slides. So it was just basically like a chalk talk for like an hour and a half. The only slides would be histology slides that I would show to tie together the principles. And it was funny because I would like inhale the whole time. Like, let's say the class is on Wednesday, all of Monday, all of Tuesday, I'm just like inhaling everything I can, right? And then I'd go teach on Wednesday and I'd like exhale in this like 2 hours, like a synopsis of what I had prepared. And then as soon as the class was over, I would take this like deep inhale for the next 2 days. And then like I'd exhale all that material. And I even remember there were these like students who would sit in the back of the room and they would keep first aid open. And anytime they saw that I would deviate, they would be like, wait a minute, you said this, but maybe it could have been said this way, or you should have said that. And I did this for 3 years in a row. And the third year, that was the month that Pathoma came out, right before that class began, because my third year, the goal was to generate a textbook that I could hand to the students and say, this is going to be the textbook for this class. So in the third year was when that textbook came out. And that was, I would say, like the final culmination of so many tens of thousands of hours probably of like prep and teaching over more than a decade that eventually like resulted in the materials. And again, it wasn't meant to be it wasn't meant to be like the only resource, but I was trying to fulfill what I felt was a void of like this big picture, general themes, covering the highlights, recognizing that you would get the details, some in pathology and some over the next 30 years as you practice.
Mhm. Well, that's amazing, mashallah. One of the kind of shifting gears here, we talked about medicine. We're kind of going to go, and we talked somewhat about Deen, and now my goal is to kind of tie it together.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the most common reactions we had after advertising this event was, wow, there's no one better to speak on this topic than Dr. Sattar. He's the perfect person for this. And you're a husband, a father, a scholar of Islam, a pathologist, you're on faculty at the University of Chicago, and then you own and manage Pathoma. How do you do it?
That's the problem. Now we're getting to the weaknesses, not the strengths. But um, so I don't. So I'll just tell you. I mean, you're in medicine, and yeah, maybe you haven't like fully developed your career, but I think the moment you decide you're going to go into medicine, the nature of medicine is that it's grueling, right? It will
Absolutely.
always make you feel this big. It doesn't matter who you are, and I'll tell you that even now, like. I honestly feel this big because you're always making mistakes, no matter how well-intentioned you might be. It's just part of the process. You're always worried about what's the next thing that could go wrong. Um, I think the one thing you learn, you're not where I'm sitting yet, but you will be one day. But I think when you look back, the thing you learn is just how little you really know
Mhm.
and just how often how weak we are and how limited we are.
Absolutely.
I think that just comes out a lot in medicine.
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, to be honest with you, it's just I'm always just every time I go into any sphere, I'm always just thinking like I'm not able to like fulfill myself even in the I'm not able to I'm not able to go toe to toe with the people in that domain. So for example, maybe I'll I'll put it from another perspective. There's some people out there who do MD, PhDs, and it's interesting if you sit down and talk to them, they'll tell you they're always like a little uncomfortable because when they sit with the MDs, they never feel like they're fully an MD just because they didn't get the chance to devote as much time as perhaps that type of MD did. But then when they sit with the PhDs, they never really feel like they're a PhD because the true PhDs are like fully devoted to their PhDs, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm just always in that boat. Like I go to my office and then I feel like I'm not the strongest pathologist that I could be. And then I go to like the masjid and I feel like I'm not fulfilling the opportunities that were presented before me. And then I like sit at home and I'm like, I'm certainly not like doing what I should have been doing to like foster the best relationships around me. And so I think that in the end, you just have to, we just have to humble ourselves. I particularly, it just, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of things that I'm doing, but in the end, I don't do any of them the way they deserve to be done. And really, it's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who puts barakah and blessings in anything. Who are we? We're just, here for this like minuscule amount of time and we occupy this like minuscule amount of space and we barely scratch the surface of the world around us. And it's really just Allah who blesses the things that we do and puts barakah in the things that we intend and is so merciful that he, gives us a reward on top of that. So, um, yeah, it appears on the resume, and not even my resume because I don't mention like a lot that I do on my resume, but it looks like, hey, all these like wonderful things are being accomplished, but in the end, everything is from Allah. And if people have benefited from anything, then my hope is that Allah will reward me for that and overlook any of the shortcomings in whatever sphere I exist in. And I think that's just one very important thing to appreciate, just to preface your question. And then I think beyond that, um, there's a lot of sacrifices from people who have to like be willing to make those sacrifices for all these things to be achieved. And so, my wife's got to make tremendous sacrifices, and she does, out of the goodness of her heart to allow me to be able to do all the things that I do. And without that support, there's no way anything's happening. And then on top of that, family. Gosh, my family, I'm not able to interact as much with the family as perhaps they deserve to be interacted with. And so there's just a lot of patience on the part of a lot of people to be able to achieve those things. Um, and then I would just say, like, as like a tertiary point after all of that, I'm very particular about what responsibilities I take on. Um, just as an interesting thing, I don't own a cell phone. It just as an example. It's for me, it's like it's a distraction, and I don't think I would be able to do the things that I've aiming to do if I was engaged too caught up in like having to deal with that device. I'm just a human being like everybody else, or perhaps even weaker, and I don't think I would be able to handle it responsibly.
Mhm.
So I'm just particular about ensuring that I set myself up in a way that matches my understanding of myself. So maybe I'll say it this way. It's so important as you guys are growing up, and not that you're not grown up, but you understand what I'm saying, growing up,
Yes, yeah.
okay? Um, one of the signs of wisdom is to look in the mirror and to appreciate who we are personally, and then understand where our strengths and weaknesses are and play to the strengths, and of course seek forgiveness for our weaknesses and try to mitigate those to the best of our ability. And there's Islam, for me, one of the benefits of beauties of Islam is it's like a mirror.
Mhm.
It gives you that opportunity to really ask yourself who you are. How did I spend my time today? What are my goals in life? What am I trying to achieve? And then it's very forgiving if you appreciate where your mistakes are.
Mhm.
So, if you look in a mirror, like you'll like you can see where something needs to be adjusted, and then you can make that adjustment. So, for example, I look in the mirror and I see maybe my glasses are not straight or whatever it might be, and I can like make a slight adjustment to fix it. Islam is like that as well. It's a mirror. When we fast, when we offer our prayers, when we're going for Hajj, these giving sadaqah, whatever it might be, zakah, it's a mirror that allows us to see who we are, and it then challenges us to make ourselves a better version of what we see. And that's a really important thing to know as you grow up, right? And what I mean by here is like grow up along the journey of life. And so important to say, hey, this is who I am, this is where I slip. And when these types of things come up in life, this is where I tend to slip. And here's where my strengths are. And then to avoid the circumstances where we tend to slip and modulate those so that we can protect ourselves and then play to our strengths. So I'm I'm a firm believer in that. And I think I learned that from my teachers and my dean and um, just life. I think it teaches that to you, but so important to recognize that, and that will allow you to be able to achieve the goals that you set out for yourself.
Mhm. Um, Speaking of, looking at your strengths and analyzing yourself in the mirror, especially regards to Dean, a lot of medical students, residents, and even attendings feel that they're only able to do quote unquote the bare minimum when
Mm,
they're on a
mm,
busier service or rotation, be it surgery. I was going to my surgery rotation before Fajr even started,
mm.
OBGYN or maybe an ICU rotation. And oftentimes they are only able to do their five daily, just fard prayers. And they feel bad. They're like, oh, I should be reading more Quran. I should be doing more dhikr. I should be doing my sunnah. Do you think this like bare minimum framing is fair, or do you think Muslim professionals should approach their deen through like a different lens?
So it's very, very common that this feeling that you're describing. I feel it all the time as well. Um, I think it's important, again, here to frame this appropriately, which is that each of us has certain strengths and weaknesses, and we have to appreciate who we who we are and where we're going to apply those strengths. And um, we're an ummah, and within that ummah, there's going to be an ummah or a community, and within that community, there's going to be different roles for different people. So all of us are not going to be scholars. Um, some of us are going to have to go out there and be doctors, lawyers, engineers, fathers, mothers. We're going to put on a lot of different hats, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the key question for each person who's choosing medicine as a career is this who I want to be and is this how I want to make my contribution? Once you make that decision, then you need to be true to that. And you need to appreciate that this is how you're going to serve humanity, maintain your humility, be a productive human being, keep yourself busy and protect yourself from yourself, honestly. It's good to be busy. Busyness it saves us.
Yeah.
So um, I think that's where you have to ask the question. And of course, you can reassess that on a yearly basis or whatever it might be, but that's where the question lies. And if the answer to that is yes, as a physician, I'm going to create a scaffold that's going to give me a productive life, that's going to allow me to embed my deen into like a standardized routine, that's going to keep me serving humanity and making a contribution to the people around me, then you should pursue that without any shame or remorse. It's typical for Shaitan to make us feel like we should be doing something else so that we don't gain the maximum benefit from what we apply ourselves to,
Hmm.
right? So like in the middle of like studying for like some hard class, all of a sudden I feel like, hey, maybe I should like be reading books on tafsir or fiqh or something like that. And to me, that at that point in time, that's a bit of a distraction because I've made a decision that my contribution is going to occur through medicine, and I need to strengthen my foundations rather than doing other things that can be done later. So,
Okay, so quality over quantity.
yeah, and Shaitan has many ways by which he causes us to fail, right? One
Yeah.
way is to simply just drown us in like our own weaknesses, okay? But another way is to take us away from the ideal to downgrade to something less than ideal, right? So what's the right thing to be doing in the middle of second semester of first year of medical school? It's to study medical school material because this is your foundation for the next 40 years. And if you're weak in years 1 and 2, you're going to carry that weakness throughout some of the career, right? So important when you decide to commit to being a physician that you commit to being a physician. So this is the first point. And it's still a type of religious activity because the goal here is the khidmah or the service of humanity. Now, this is a different conversation. How do you avoid being deluded by the world at a later point, right? But for me, most medical students come in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and they're desiring to serve humanity. The,
Yeah.
the, the complications of like, salaries and these types hasn't come in yet. It's just I'm coming in because this is what I want to do. This is how I can make a contribution and an impact, right? So um, you have to be you. you have to do the things that are going to allow you to achieve your goals. And of course, the dean creates a certain requirement and places responsibility upon us that we must fulfill. So, but it's not so intensive that it doesn't allow us to do other things. So, for example, I mean, I've got to pray my five times I've got to pray my prayers. That's non-negotiable. I got to fast in the month of Ramadan. That's non-negotiable. Ideally, I should be following the sunnah in my worship, but also in the way I behave and my character. These things, we should maintaining them. But all the extras can be done later in the sense that you'll have lots of time. Look, I mean, if you think about medicine, third year is the first 2 years is tough. Third
Mhm.
year is particularly tough,
Yeah.
right? And then fourth years comes a little bit easier. And
Hmm.
then first year of residency is tough. And
Yeah.
then fellowship can be tough. And so there's a few periods of time where it's like exceedingly challenging. But then
Hmm.
after that, it opens up many doors to be able to do many things.
Hmm.
So I would say all the goals that you have as a medical student for your dean, particularly like the advanced goals, write them down on paper and
Okay.
save them for the future.
Okay.
Focus
Inshallah.
on focus on medical school. Now, we're not talking
Okay.
about the mandates of the dean. Those are obviously we
Yes.
mentioned, those are non-negotiable, but the extras, right? So that's principle one. Principle two, inevitably you will have some free time throughout all of your medical training. Or even at the most difficult of times, you will have free time. Important to pick one goal so that you're not all over the place.
Okay.
All right. So my advice generally to the medical students that I often interact with is to simply say that throughout the period of med school, my primary focus is going to be on the Quran.
Okay.
I'm going to spend 20 minutes every single day um, reciting one verse over and over again so it becomes familiar to me. Or if I have the ability to memorize, maybe I'll memorize a couple verses every day. Or if I have the ability to simply recite a page and try to engage it, I'm going to engage it. But I'm going to take 20 minutes every single day, just like I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to have a spiritual meal from the Quran.
Hmm.
And that is a very stabilizing force and a very empowering force,
Hmm.
particularly when done consistently. And
Absolutely.
that's the primary thing that I think every medical student should be focused on once they get their prayers straight.
Okay.
And then what'll happen is you'll eventually get to a period where those immense challenges that are present in training are just no longer on your shoulders,
Hmm.
and then the world will be your oyster. You
Okay.
could go study so many things and learn so many things and engage your local scholars and your local imams and your local programming. And even nowadays, so much is available on Zoom. So there's always going to be lots and lots of opportunities.
Okay.
But my take home message is when you commit to medicine
Okay.
so that you become the best physician that you can become. And that will actually strengthen you in such a way that you'll be able to flex your muscles at so many other periods, which will allow you to be able to attain all of your goals.
Inshallah. Inshallah. I
Inshallah.
know a struggle I personally have. Oftentimes, like I try to do the quote unquote bare minimum. I make myself a list where I'm like, oh, I'm going to pray 5 times a day. I'm going to do like 100 istighfar. I'm going to read like one page of the Quran. And sometimes I treat it as more of like a list of tasks rather than like something that I have to be spiritually present for.
Yeah.
I try to, fight the thoughts that, oh, like, you're not doing it right, but I'm like, I'd rather be consistent in like fard at least. But do you have any advice for that? Because oftentimes as medical students, we feel kind of like robots, right? It's the same day over and over again, like doing our Anki. And oftentimes, we have these specific tasks we've set for ourselves in regards to our Deen. But how can we be more spiritually present?
Yeah. So I think here you have to become literate on the world around you. And what I mean by that is you should be able to look at the sun and be absolutely mesmerized by the force that causes that sun to rise.
Mhm.
And you should be able to look at the sky and be absolutely blown away by the force that causes all those stars to maintain their positions in the galaxy and the universe. So you part of it is to just become literate uh, with all of the natural signs that Allah has placed around you.
Hmm.
The entire world is a billboard that is advertising the greatness of Allah. Every leaf,
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. Yeah.
every breeze, every breath you take,
Hmm.
right? Every time you engage with anything,
Yeah.
it's really just a billboard that is advertising La ilaha illallah.
Absolutely.
And you're going to have to learn to read those signs just like you learn how to read a street sign or a book or a regular like billboard.
Hmm.
There's no competition. I mean, if Apple can put up a billboard that says shot on iPhone, whatever, you know, and it causes all these people to think about what iPhone they carry and whether they should upgrade their phone. And if they don't have an iPhone, whether they should buy one. And those billboards are like sparsely placed throughout the highway. Then what do you say about every ray of light that comes from the sun and like literally is like a firework as it hits the particles of the atmosphere and, reveals some unique um, creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean,
Absolutely.
the world is a billboard, and the Quran is constantly demanding us or encouraging us and demanding us to like appreciate the signs around us.
Yeah.
So, so I just think like, yes, if it becomes this like isolated list of do's and don'ts, it does become a chore and it can drag and it can be difficult but if you can scratch beyond the external and get a little bit into the internal realities of what these things actually are, um, I think that just empowers it in a different way.
Hmm.
And by the way, the same is true of the practice of medicine, right? If the practice of medicine is just a bunch of rote things that I'm going to do every day, but I don't see the humanity behind it, then it really becomes a chore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it
That's
does. I
very
mean,
true.
there's lots of people who burn out. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the burnout is only due to this, but if you can appreciate the underlying reality behind it and be really impassioned by the service of Allah's creation, in this case, humanity, it just really changes the way you see things and the way that you approach the career as a whole.
Absolutely. Speaking on, recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's signs and remaining grounded, um, for all of us here, be it medical professionals or the majority of us medical students, this career path inevitably brings wealth, respect, and in some cases, authority. I mean, how many mosque boards are filled with doctors?
Yes, yes.
So a lot of and it, a lot of community members look up to the doctors of the community and ask them for advice, sometimes not even medically related. And with, again, this power and authority, how do we ensure that we don't fall into arrogance or looking down on others because of our salary, title, or in ensuring that we don't neglect our religious obligations due to busyness? Because sometimes, unfortunately, there are some in the medical profession who say, "Oh, well, like I'm a doctor, like that's all I need to do. That I don't need to do anything more. I don't, for them, the extent of their religious obligation is just being a doctor." But yeah, how do we like stay grounded and how do we um, walk with sincerity and remain humble and remember that at the end of the day, we're all servants of Allah and we're all going to the same grave.
Yeah. Again, here I think it's important to appreciate a few things. The first is that everything has to be done in the context of the magnificence of Allah.
Hmm.
And until we can burst the bubble of the narrow focused vision that we tend to keep, it becomes very difficult to see that reality. So
Hmm.
just as an example, if you put two, let's say you put two 3-year-olds in a room. No, let's say there's one 2-year-old and one 3-year-old in a room. All right. The 3-year-old is going to be like, I'm bigger, I'm three, you're two, right?
Yeah.
And then if an adult walks in the room, the adult is like, what are you guys talking about? You're all kids, it's funny to see them think that way. Now, the reason they think that way is because they're just narrowly isolated in their little world. They're not able to see beyond like who's two and who's three, right? Because if you actually saw the bigger picture, you would see that everyone is just these that we're both just children. So here, part of the reality is that, or sorry, part of the issue is that you have to like appreciate the magnificence of Allah, not the skills that I have. Because sure, if I compare myself to a few other people around me, I might be taller, I might be smarter, I might be more wealthy, whatever characteristic I'm comparing. But the reality is that all of us are nothing in the face of the magnificence of Allah. And the more you can appreciate the magnificence of Allah, the more you recognize that I can never worship Allah the way He deserves to be worshipped. It's
Love
interesting because if you look at the Deen, even the Deen teaches us this. For example, you finish your prayer, you make salam, and what's the first thing? Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. It's a bit ironic, right? In the sense that, like, hey, you just finished prayer, so why are you seeking forgiveness? Like, you just did a good act. You don't need to seek forgiveness. But the reality is that even though I offered this prayer and I might be ready to pat myself on the back that I've achieved something, the reality is that I have yet to worship Allah the way He truly deserves to be worshiped, nor can I ever offer anything because this is the Lord and I am His creation.
absolutely.
So this attitude, right, of ever patting ourselves on the back, it can't exist in the context of the magnificence of Allah. So it's so important to always keep our attention focused on the greatness of Allah.
Absolutely.
By the way,
Um,
this is just a life challenge too. For example, let's say that like you want residency A, all right, and
inshallah.
you want residency A, and person also your friend also wants residency A.
Mhm,
Okay, let's not use you. There's Zaid, and Zaid, is the smartest kid in the class. Has crossed off all the boxes and done everything deserving of getting this residency.
mhm,
And then the application cycle comes up, and Zaid doesn't get it, but Bakr gets it instead.
mhm,
Okay. Now Zaid is all upset. And Zaid says, "Oh my God, this is not fair. I did everything. I was better than him. I'm smarter than him. I worked harder than him. I did all more activities than him. My board scores are better, etc. So how could it be that I didn't get this residency?" And then jealousy begins to grow, right?
yeah,
Um, Now, the problem there is that Zaid is comparing himself to Bakr and is not seeing the bigger picture. He's narrowly focused on Bakr and not seeing the bigger picture, which is what? The bigger picture is that nothing happens except through the will of Allah. And that if somebody else got that spot, it was because that was best, what was best for them, and this is what is best for me.
absolutely.
Right? But
Absolutely.
we fail to see we get shackled by our narrow vision of me and Bakr, right?
Mhm,
Zaydan, but we fail to see the bigger picture.
mhm,
So you always have to break the shackles. By the way, Islam is simply just one way. One of the beauties of Islam is that it's constantly shattering our narrow-minded focus.
mhm,
I'm narrowly focused on what I think is important, which is the world that surrounds me. But Islam reminds me that this world is a test and there's something beyond it.
mhm.
I'm narrowly focused on what's happening in my daily life, but Islam is reminding me that this life doesn't matter. This life is merely a test, and what really is going to be of consequence is the hereafter, right? So
Absolutely.
my vision is shackling me to to immediately what's in front of me. Islam is breaking those shackles and widening my perspective. So you got to have a really wide perspective, number one. And number two, and by the way, the question was like, how can we keep ourselves humble, right? So by widening the perspective and seeing the greatness of Allah. And number two, always remembering our shortcomings, always looking in the mirror and just remembering who we really are,
Yeah,
right? I might be able to present myself in front of the community as A, B, and C, but if the community really knew who I was, they probably wouldn't be able to tolerate my presence in the masjid whatsoever. So it's just the magnificent mercy of Allah that Allah keeps my sins hidden and keeps my
absolutely.
inconsistencies hidden and keeps my hypocrisy hidden and allows me to come into the masjid or come into any gathering with honor such that I can say salam and people are excited to say wa alaikum salam back.
Absolutely.
So just a bit of humility can be helpful, but and then to keep ourselves in good company.
Mhm,
When you sit with good company, it's a light. It shines and allows you to see the defects that can't be appreciated in certain contexts without that light.
Hmm.
So good company is so important. The masjid is so important. It's a massive light in our lives. And that also will help to keep us humble. You need people in your life that can tell you when you're veering off course because you can't necessarily see it. One of the things I also tell medical students in general is that write yourself a letter. Like now, as a med student, write yourself a letter that you want yourself to read 20 years from now. Call it
Okay.
Why I Went into Medicine and Who I Wish to Become.
Hmm.
Write it, make a one-page letter, and open it 10 years from now, and then read it again 20 years from now. And just see, did my compass shift slightly such that I ended up far from where I thought I was supposed to be? Or did I maintain the ideals that I set for myself when my mind was a little more pure and my intentions were a little more clear?
Absolutely. That's amazing. Going back to establishing for a lot of we put up the Q&A
Mhm.
earlier this morning, and some of the recurring questions I noticed were that some people found it difficult to pray all of their five prayers on time in the hospital. Sometimes they felt like they weren't allowed a break. There weren't proper like restroom facilities for them to do proper wudu.
Yeah, yeah,
And they felt like, oh, like I'm mainly around non-Muslims. I don't know if they're accommodating or not. And just due to the busyness, they've had to like pray late or like miss a prayer. What advice do you have for those students and residents who struggle to do their five daily prayers on time?
yeah. Well, look, we're a minority, right, in a difficult circumstance. Often in the busyness of the hospital, the cards are stacked against us. And so I think the first thing, let's just start very basic, which is that we should wake up every morning, and this should be the first thing on our priority list. When you wake up in the morning and you kind of say, here's what my day is going to look like, I
Hmm.
think that you wake up with an intention
Hmm.
that the most important thing today, which is what is going to maintain me in my deen and sustain me throughout my entire day, is my five prayers.
Hmm.
And they just have to be priority number one because it is priority number one. So that's the first thing. In the morning, you wake up with this intention. And then what you do is, as you go through the day, you appreciating that intention, you find every available opportunity. And sometimes it does require you to be a little bit um, sort of on top of it. So, for example, I really recommend that every med student make a rule for themselves that they pray at the very beginning of the time of the prayer.
Hmm.
And that ideally they have wudu throughout the day. And if not possible, then at least before the time of each prayer comes in. So, for
Hmm.
example, it might be hard to take away 20 minutes to go find a bathroom, make wudu, then go pray, and then like be away from a surgery, right, at a very important time, particularly in the winter. But it's probably possible to make wudu beforehand, right? And then break away for 5 minutes. And because you're already set with your wudu and you're kind of aiming for the beginning time when the prayer first enters, you can get that prayer done.
Hmm.
Um, so you have to be a bit creative, no doubt. You have to be a bit creative. So first, make sure you come up with that intention every morning. Number two, be a bit creative and appreciate the circumstances before they come to you, right?
Absolutely.
So you know you're in a busy circumstance, so appreciate that. Um, and then I would say number three, at the end of the day, when you're reflecting on what you were able to achieve, if there's any deficiency, make it up immediately. Don't let it sit. So, for example, let's just say that there was an extreme circumstance and I wasn't able to complete Maghrib because some, crazy circumstance happened. I don't know. And but then don't let yourself go to bed without completing that Maghrib prayer. You don't want these things to stack on you because then it becomes really difficult to break the shackle of like this this momentum of having missed prayers. So you
Right.
got to break that momentum.
Absolutely.
Um, and again, this isn't the perfect solution, and I know that it's difficult. It can be challenging at times, but um, make that intention every day.
Hmm.
Seek the opportunities where there's a miss. At the end of the day, think about where the failures were, and then make changes in how you're going to approach it the next time. And always make sure that every prayer gets completed, even if you happen to not have been able to perform it at its time.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I know for my surgery rotation, I had to show up before Fajr even started. So I would leave
Mm,
the
yeah,
house with wudu, and then when I would be pre-rounding, I would like sneak away. And I remember I used to pray that entire month in one of those patient conference rooms. And I mean, makes sense that at 4 in the morning no one's using that, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
As a third year, I was in on I assisted on a 24-hour surgery.
Oh God.
It was a very long case. It was a burn kind of plastics kind of reconstruction type thing. And I remember they finally sent me home at 2 in the morning, like when I fell asleep, like literally on the standing on that bench. But um, it does happen, right? It's just a weird, unfortunate difficulty that sometimes arises. But even in that circumstance, I still remember being able to pray because look, people have to eat, right? People have to take breaks to use the restroom. People have to do other things. And so invariably you can find the time because other people also have requirements that are just human that allow you the windows to be able to do the things that you need to do. And the prayers honestly are not that uh, lengthy. Like they're not so hard. You can always squeeze them in. So be creative. I think if you're creative, you'll always be able to find windows.
Absolutely. Um, when navigating kind of shifting topics here. But speaking of, Muslims being minorities, especially like religious minorities, right? Medicine often exposes us to certain ethical dilemmas, be it end of life care, be it resource limitations, certain insurance, certain procedures. How do you recommend approaching these challenges Islamically? Someone asked a really good question saying, how can we maintain ikhlas in medicine while navigating ethical dilemmas when hospital policies or societal expectations may conflict with Islamic principles?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it depends on where you are in your career. So, at the beginning, when you're training, you're going to have very limited ability to flex, your muscle to be able to um, make a make a statement as to how things should be done. But what happens is as you mature and you gain skill and you eventually become the attending, you're going to have a lot more say in those types of things. Um, what I would say here is that very important to be highly qualified and
Hmm.
well trained. Because
Hmm.
if you're highly qualified and well trained, people are going to respect you. One very nice thing about medicine is in the end, people do respect knowledge, hard work, um, and skill. It is very highly respected in medicine. And so if you can gain those skills, then you're going to have lots of room in your career to be able to establish guidelines that people will respect. And even if they may not want to follow those guidelines, they'll certainly give you the space to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
So important. I cannot emphasize this. I can't remember the last time I mean, I tell everyone to do one fellowship. But honestly, I think sometimes you should do two or three. I have no problem doing three. I didn't do three, but I often will have people like I will advise them do three. Why? Because it's like an extra year or two sometimes, right? To do an extra fellowship. But the qualifications it gives you, and it just puts you one edge, one up, one just a little edge ahead of certain, of the average physician, which then gives you a lot of space to be able to do the things that you want to do, and also to be able to be respected for the views that you hold.
Hmm. Absolutely. Just to respect your time, I wasn't sure like how late you were able to stay. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
I have a few more minutes. It's not a
Few more
problem.
minutes?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's up
perfect.
to you guys, what you
Um,
have planned.
awesome, thank you. Um, Someone asked, how do you balance your interest, specialty interest, with the want to make money, to do good for your family, and to do good for your community when picking a specialty? I know you mentioned fellowship, and in fellowship, you're not quite making that attending salary yet, right?
So,
But for those who, want, for those who are considering, their interests versus income, like, is there any advice?
choose what you love. That's so important. You're going to be doing it for 40 years. You can't choose a specialty because you think that you're going to make more just by doing that specialty. It just life becomes very miserable that way. And you want to be able to wake. I know, like we can't see the whole picture, but I will just tell you that medicine's grueling. It's a marathon, not a race. You've got to be able to practice for the next 40 years. And you want to be able to wake up every morning and be excited about your job and not feel like I wish I could escape, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's so important to not let the world tell you what you should be
Hmm.
because salary X or whatever glamour or whatever might be associated with it. Really think about what you enjoy. And
Okay.
then once you figure out what you enjoy, then I would say within that, try to get subspecialized.
Hmm. Okay.
Because the greater the degree of self-specialization, the more you're going to have the muscle that I mentioned earlier, which is that you're going to be able to dictate your schedule better. You're going to be able to dictate how you'd like to practice better. You're going to be able to be more of a contributor to how the hospital or how the practice is set up. So very important to pick what you enjoy and then get extra training in that as a means of a strength. That's what I would recommend.
Um, so just to wrap things up, I guess what is a piece of advice you A would give yourself when you were in our shoes,
Mm,
or B, any advice you have for Muslim students who are wanting to pursue Islamic studies during their medical training?
yeah. Well, wanting to pursue, let's do the latter first. Wanting to do Islamic studying during medical training, I again write it on a piece of paper and save it for the future. Because again, you commit to medicine, it's a difficult uh, grind. So I think put your energy towards what you commit yourself to. And then, yes, there will be some free time where you can learn the things that you need to learn that can take you on that, make that journey a little bit easier when you're done, but save it for the time that you have the time to do it. Because all that's going to happen is if you start pursuing like advanced Islamic studies during the middle of your like difficult training periods in medicine, you're going to you're going to be left empty-handed. Neither will your medicine be strong, nor will your Islamic studies be strong. Um, but if you devote the time to medicine when you're supposed to, it will make you strong, give you a lot of freedom to be able to do amazing things as you proceed with your career. So, um, do what you commit yourself to do. That's very important. When you're studying Islam, really do it at a time when you have the time to do it. And when you're studying medicine, give it its due and really focus on studying medicine. So that was the second question. But then the first question, what was the question for that?
What advice would you give to yourself when you were in
Yes,
our
okay.
shoes?
Yes, okay, very important. Or I can say it another way. What do you wish that they would have taught you in medical school that they never mentioned?
Hmm.
And I think that you're going to have to come to your conference in Dallas to hear,
Oh,
because
okay.
I'm going to talk about that. So it's wellness. I think that the challenge of medicine isn't the information that you have in your mind.
Hmm.
It's maintaining the energy, excitement, care, concern, desire to serve that underpins why you gained that information to begin with. Believe me, you're not going to struggle 5 years from now on what's the difference between acute lymphoblastic leukemia and acute myeloid leukemia. You're going to get it eventually. It's a language, you learn to speak it. Okay. This isn't the challenge. The challenge isn't how much knowledge you can like absorb in your brain in a short period of time. The challenge is being the human being that's supposed to administer that knowledge to their patients. This is where the true challenge of medicine lies. And this is what is the hardest thing to maintain. That love for humanity that underpins the practice of medicine, the
Hmm.
desire to serve your patients in that way, right?
Hmm.
This is where the challenge lies. And in order for you to succeed in that, you have to be well yourself. The moment we get burnt out, the moment we begin to see the blue skies as gray, the moment we begin to see the patients as a burden as opposed to an opportunity, that's where we lost the game, both religiously and worldly.
Absolutely.
So, so this is the big issue. And honestly, it's only now that we've begun to appreciate that. And this is why you see things like the boards going to pass fail instead of like, giving a score because we don't want to burn you out. We don't want to have you, we don't want to tear away at your fabric, right? You'll see
Hmm.
all med schools, most med schools, I shouldn't say all, many med schools have become pass fail because again, the stress adds up and eventually it can derail you.
Hmm.
So if I could go back and just remind myself of one thing, it would be to maintain balance because this is a marathon, not a race. And you want to be as energetic and productive at the age of 55 as you are at 25.
Hmm.
And that means that you have to protect and preserve yourself. And subhanAllah, one of the great beauties of our deen is that it actually is a formula for balance and wellness. It reminds us of the importance of sleep. It reminds us of the importance of eating wholesome and good and well. It reminds us of letting grudges go so that you don't carry the weight of that over a lifetime, right? It reminds us that Allah is very forgiving and to
Hmm.
not bury ourselves in the mistakes of yesterday, but rather to look forward to the opportunities of tomorrow. So these types of things are so important. And um, I call it like, for me personally, and I know this would apply only if you have that faith, but it's like a revealed wellness. And you see this in the hospitals everywhere today, by the way. I'm sure you guys have it even in the med school. There's these wellness committees and wellness
Yes,
sessions.
I'm on one of
Okay,
those wellness
okay, well,
schedules.
those weren't there like 10, 15 years ago, right? Where
Yeah.
is this coming from? It's coming from a generation of physicians that have appreciated that burnout's real
Hmm.
and that just as important, um, just as important as it is to practice medicine well, it's important to be well so that you can practice medicine well.
Hmm.
And this is the key advice. And I think that, again, if you just honestly, if you were just to maintain the Deen, it it inherently does that for you.
Hmm.
It keeps you balanced. It resets you. It reminds you of the reality of this world versus the hereafter. It reminds you of the importance of embedding prayer into your day because it's going to make you whole again, etc. So important in this day and age for people to appreciate that because if you thought it was difficult in my generation, you guys have it much harder because you're dealing with devices and all of the stress that's occurring through there. Just as a closing point, I sometimes ask the question to myself, like, what are people going to look back at 100 years from now and say, oh, wow, these guys didn't appreciate exactly what was happening. I think like today you can look back 100 years ago and say they didn't recognize what was going on with the cigarettes when they were like literally handing them out in the doctor's waiting rooms, at a point in history. And I think social media and these devices and just how much they fray away at our core, just how much they tear at the core, all of that's going to be appreciated, unfortunately, 50, 60 years from now, when you start seeing the long-term ramifications of what it means to be in the whole world at the same time, but trying to be who you are and comparing yourself against every single person that's on social media and it's a difficult challenge. So it's just so important to maintain that wellness. And the dean provides so many principles that are useful. And that's what we're going to talk about in my session with you guys in Dallas. That's my goal. Not
Oh,
not not to do it comprehensively, but to give you some examples to get you thinking.
perfect. No, love. We so appreciate you coming and taking your time out of your afternoon, your evening to come and talk with us. And we are very excited to host you in Dallas, inshallah. And I know the comments are also filled with people saying like thank you and all saying all these amazing things. And may Allah continue to bless you and protect you.
Inshallah. It was my honor and pleasure to be able to spend time with all of you this evening. May Allah increase each of you, and may He use you for the service of His Deen and use you as servants to His creation. And may He allow all of you to be able to achieve the goals that you set for yourselves, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I profusely apologize for the technical difficulties. Definitely did not mean for that to happen, but alhamdulillah, inshallah, everyone got to hear. And if not, we did record the session, so we will edit out the parts where there's technical difficulties, and the entire recorded session will be there. Another initiative we have to continue with balancing Deen and being busy medical students is an initiative called Quran Circles. It's an initiative to help us understand the Word of Allah in a manageable fashion and help us cultivate a strong relationship with the Quran. Groups meet once a week for only 30 minutes. You read 1 to 2 pages, and the focus is on reading the translation from the clear Quran and reflecting on the meaning of the verses. And people of any level of understanding of Arabic can join. They're sending out the form in the comments right now. I believe Muhammad is going to send it. There we go. Um, so yeah, fill it out and we'll start organizing Zoom calls. And then yes, to hear the rest of Dr. Sattar's thoughts and wisdom on Islamic wellness, please come to our conference, Dallas, Texas, October 31st to November 2nd. His session is the last session on Sunday, 10 a.m. to noon. So make sure your flights are after that. Tickets again, $125. We have a poster session where you can present your research, and inshallah, your school can help mitigate some of those costs as well. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, please follow us on Instagram, AMMSA.national, and or you can email us at amsa.national@gmail.com. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And again,